With Parashat Bo, things are getting very difficult for Egypt. The plagues are weighing down on them, and they are weakening. It is to the point where the entire nation is essentially saying to Paro, "Haterem teda ki aveda Mitzrayim." How long is it going to take you to recognize that Egypt is lost? It's falling apart. And yet, Paro cannot bring himself to allow the children of Israel to leave. God has kept his heart strong in order to be able to withstand all it is that's coming. After the disaster of the hail and the destruction that it brings, the locusts swarm into Egypt and eat up everything that is left from the hail. And the plagues continue. Darkness ensues in Egypt for 3 days, at the point that it says Ve'amesh Hoshech, it was tactile almost as to how dark it was in Egypt. And at this point, Egypt is on its knees. Moshe comes to Paro and warns him that the last plague is going to be terrible, that the firstborn of Egypt will die. And that, of course, is reminiscent to the first things that Moshe said to Paro at the very beginning of the campaign. Beni bechori Israel, my firstborn Israel, is what God says to Paro at the very beginning. And so, in direct response to holding God's firstborn, the firstborns of Egypt die in the final plague. And that runs, and during this time, God commands Moshe to tell the people to put blood on their doorposts, to delineate those members of Israel who wish to walk into freedom, who wish to leave, who recognize the messages that are coming out in terms of Moshe and his ministry and the plagues and God's lessons that are being brought through Egypt during this entire campaign of plague. The parasha opens saying, this is going to be the point, God says, that my sign should be instilled into the heart, into the insides of Egypt, and so that you should tell your children and your children's children what it is that I did to Egypt, how I engaged with Egypt and brought them to this point. The first Pesach is held in Egypt with a lamb. The Paschal lamb is eaten by the people among their families. The first mitzvah of the Torah is presented in this week's parasha, the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, along with 19 other mitzvot in this parasha. Israel is coming into their nationhood. The commandments are being given by God. The covenant is being established and firmly developed. Here is the birthing place in the parasha of Bo of the nation of Israel and its freedom. And at the end of the parasha, Paro finally capitulates and sends the people of Israel out of Egypt. He says, "Get out now." To which Moshe simply says, "We will go and we're good and ready. What do you think, we're going to leave in the middle of the night like some thieves? We will go in the morning, at our leisure, in our way, as we wish."